Excellent. We've got one of our guests online. So before we start, just a quick explanation about the event. Um, it's January, it's the start of another year. So with that in mind, we wanted to look ahead to the future for the future of the youth in Palestine. What are their dreams? What are their aspirations? But also, what are the obstacles in achieving those dreams and aspirations? So we have two guests with us who will help us with this discussion and what else we can do as individuals and what support we can give to Palestinians wherever we are in the world. There will be a Q&A at the end, inshallah. So leave a question, leave a comment if you have a question, and if you also have a comment in support of the speakers, please do drop a comment as well. And if you want to see more of these kinds of events, please do join our team as a volunteer. There's a link in the bio, and I'll drop a link in the comments as well. With no further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest, Sister Sejood Shneewra. And she is a journalist and an activist who lives and works in Gaza in Palestine and is part of the 16th October media group, which aims to give young Palestinians a voice through media. And today she will be sharing some of her experiences of working with the youth. So, Sister, the first question I'd like to ask you, just to start simple, what do youths want to be when they grow up? When you talk to them about why they're part of 16th October group and so on, what are the kind of answers they give you?
Yes. Let me first thank you for giving us this a chance. Thank you so much. Now, to talk about the Palestinian children in Gaza Strip, actually, they need just simple things. They want to live normal life. They want, they are children, so they are innocent. They want to live the world they created in their mind that is empty of fear, empty of occupation. They want to live like normal life. They want to be the school, and exams are the only hindrance in their lives. They just live in tranquility, they live a calm life and simple things. They just want to think about their future and positively how their future will be, and that's it. They just want to think positively without fearing, without you can say, yeah, they just need simple life, and they want the rights that human rights organizations guaranteed to every single human and every single child that Israel occupation violated these rights.
Shukran. Thank you for the very comprehensive answer. Before we move on, just a reminder to those who are attending right now, if you could invite others and tag others in to join in as well, inshallah. Let's grow the audience as we talk. So just to continue with that, Sister Sejoud, so what challenges are they facing in achieving those goals? As you said, these are very simple desires and dreams, but what is getting in their way? What's stopping them?
Yes, the Gaza Strip is besieged since 2006 by Israel occupation. So I can say that the main reason that hinder their dreams and achieving these dreams is the Israel occupation. And Gaza Strip has witnessed the four aggressions that Israel occupation launched, and we can say about the siege that imposed on the Gaza Strip, because Israel occupation sieged Gaza from the air, land, and sea. So they cannot travel to. I mean, for the talented children who have talents in such field and want to tell the whole world about it, and to tell the world a message that they are not numbers, they are creative children, and want to be like any child in the world, to tell the world about their creativity. And this is actually couldn't happen because of the siege imposed on the Gaza Strip. And we can say that the crossings that Israel occupation close on a daily basis, so they cannot travel and they cannot participate in we can say international events like any child in the world. And many people or many children in Gaza are talented in art, so they can they want to participate in events relate to art, and to tell the world about their creativity in this field. Many of them want to be international footballers, but they cannot do this actually because the closing of crossings by Israeli occupation, and the siege that we can say that it is the main result of closing the crossings.
Shukran for that. And also, you did also mention that education is a huge part of the children achieving their dreams. And so, you know, how is education and therefore the children's futures being disrupted through the lives that they're living?
Yes. Now, you know, as a result of the aggressions that Israeli occupation launched, many schools were destroyed and demolished. We can say 65 approximately were destroyed in Gaza in the recent aggression, May 2021 aggression. So we can say about the siege too, that many of them like have scholarships to complete their study in the outside, but they cannot travel. And we can say about the the Israeli occupation actions and the Palestinian curriculum, and because you know that Israel occupation try all their best to change the Palestinian curriculum and we can say that not to make the Palestinian know the truth and know anything about their land, and we can say that the Israeli occupation actions too, and when Israel occupation deliberately targeted the schools in Gaza, this can prevent many students from studying because it is demolished, so they cannot study and complete their studies, and this is really very hard and we can say very great obstacles in front of completing their studies.
You raised an interesting point that in terms of Israel influencing Palestine's education systems. Would you be able to give a bit more detail on that? What control does Israel have on Palestine's education?
Yes, actually, they attempted to ban books during the national edition, like what happened in the West Bank. And we can say the detention campaigns against the Palestinian children, students, and teachers. This has happened in the West Bank, actually. They detained the teachers and to prevent them from 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 performing their work in the schools, and as I said, they want to erase everything related to the Palestinian curriculum, and yes, this what happened actually.
It's still as you said, it's as recently as last year, May last year, and so it's a continuous aggression against the simple things that the children need for their education, the physical buildings, the books, and the teachers. And without these educational infrastructure, it really does undermine the entire education system. Something I've noticed though, and well, I say I've noticed statistically, alhamdulillah, Palestine has a highly educated society. So how do students and educators stay motivated despite all of these obstacles that they face? How do the students, the teachers, everyone who's involved with the education system, how do they stay motivated and continue helping create such an educated society in Palestine?
Yes. Actually, from my point of view, the success stories in Palestine has a great role because, you know, Palestine has we can say that many Palestinians achieved very great achievements and that can serve their community, and that the whole the world know about it, and that has a great role to prove to the whole world that Palestinians are not numbers, but they are creative and they are human beings who can do whatever they want, but in good and in normal circumstances. So I think this has the success stories have a great role at being motivated. Another thing is the what happened in the last periods, the initiatives campaigns that many of the unemployed graduates launched in the Gaza Strip to serve their the school students to complete their studying, actually, especially after the aggression and the demolition of some schools, and after the COVID-19 and closing the schools completely, and actually the whole country were closed, you know. So they wanted to serve their those school students by making or creating classes for free, and many of them like made this initiative campaign, and like ask the other graduates from all over Gaza to come and join this campaign and make like we can say that they want to make an complete education process and to create a channel on YouTube and start explaining these lessons for children because of the closing of schools. So they don't want to make these circumstances and these like everything happened in Gaza to affect their educational level. They want them to be educators and to complete their education, because this is the only way they have to practice their life and to live and to tell the world that yeah, we have we are human, we want we have the right to educate, to we can say to learn and to study like any other like the other children's in the world. So I think these two reasons are the most important reasons for why being still being motivated.
Alhamdulillah, imagine seeing education as an act of resistance. And we are going to move on to our next speaker. And before we do so, just another reminder for those who are viewing: do tag in your friends. Do pull them into this conversation as well. We are very fortunate to have these two activists, these two experienced speakers with us today. Let's make the most of this opportunity. So tag your friends in, pull them into the discussion, and also if you have any questions or comments, do drop them into the chat, and we'll pull them up for the Q&A at the end. So I'd like to invite our next speaker, Muslim Imran. He is a Palestinian in Malaysia and leads the PCO Malaysia organization there. So brother, we've heard a lot about the problems that Palestinian youths face and the obstacles that they face to achieving their dreams. So it sounds like the issues arise from systematic oppression. So basically, what is it like for a child to grow up in under the boot of an apartheid state, under the occupation of Israel? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, my brother. And it's a good opportunity to speak to you and to the sister in this discussion. I think the Palestinian struggle is multifaceted. It's a bit complicated. It's a case of colonial occupation. It's one of the few remnants of the colonial era. Most of the global south has achieved its freedom and independence, but the Palestinians have not yet. It's also an apartheid, as you have rightly mentioned, which continues to get worse, and it's being legislated now. Israel, since day one, was not only a settler colonial expansionist occupation state, but was also a racist state. But eventually, in the last few years, Israel is coming out publicly as an apartheid regime. In the last 2 decades, Israel was run by extremist right-wing governments, and every government is worse than its predecessor. They are moving towards the right. In 2018, a few years ago, the Israeli parliament enacted a new act, the Nation State Law or Act, which explicitly makes Israel an apartheid regime for the Jewish Israelis only. So our youth, our children, our women, our people, our villages, our community is facing repression by an expansionist regime, repression by a regime so obsessed with superiority inflicting pain and suffering on the Palestinian people, on the layman, on children and women. As recent as last night, they abducted an old Palestinian man, an 80 years old man, beat him to death. This is the kind of regime that we are facing. Our youth would have no future if this systemic repression continues. It has to be dismantled. This apartheid regime has to come to an end. And we're not talking about mass killing of Jews, as some idiots might think. It's a struggle for freedom, for emancipation. We want to end this systemic repression, this systemic apartheid. If we are talking about equality, about human rights, about self-determination, how can a group of people continue to dominate another group of people, deny them their basic human rights, and continue this way in the 21st century? This can never continue. It is bad, but it's not going to last. We are very certain that at one point of time this will come to an end. The world still has some sane people, sane leaders, communities, and our people continue to struggle for their freedom. So eventually, our youth will have a better future, but the price is going to be very heavy.
So let's, for those who maybe are not as familiar with the oppression of Palestine, the occupation of Palestine, could we spell it out for them very plainly? What is it? Why would Israel seek to make it so difficult for the future generations of Palestine to develop? And how does that fit into the apartheid state, the apartheid system that Israel is running under, the system of government, the system of governance and control in Israel? Brother Muslim, would you be able to really spell it out for those who are not too familiar with the situation in Palestine?
Yeah, this probably might require us to shed some light on the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, how Israel came to existence in the first place. I mentioned earlier that we are one of the remnants of the colonial era. Most of most of Asia and Africa were occupied and colonized by white European powers in the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Unfortunately for the Palestinians, we were occupied by the British, who, after 30 years of colonization or so-called mandate, instead of giving us our right of self-determination, decided to pave the way for a foreign entity to be created over our land. The Jewish people who were persecuted in Europe, who were considered a problem by these white colonial powers, were granted a promise to have a homeland in Palestine. The Balfour Declaration, which many know of, signed by the Foreign Secretary of the British government in 1917, promised the Zionist movement a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Days later, Palestine was occupied by the British in 1917, December 1917. And the British government in Palestine was run by Zionists. Now, the Zionist movement was still a new infant. It had a lot of common interests with certain elites in the British society and in Western European powers, and eventually in the US as well. They influenced each other. They helped each other. The British colonial masters decided that it's best if they create a new state in Palestine, not for the original inhabitants, but for these European Jews who were not welcome in their own societies in Europe. They, through 30 years of migration and repression of the Palestinian people, they helped create the state of Israel. And of course, it was at first supposed to be created peacefully, but eventually the Zionist militias, which were in thousands, in tens of thousands, and which outnumbered not only the Palestinians but also all the Arab armies in the region. They took over Palestine by force in 1948. Even Israeli historians now document and call the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. We can refer to one of Israel's new historians, Ilan Pappé. Prof. Ilan Pappé wrote some excellent works using Israeli classified documents that prove very clearly that the Zionist movement, the Zionist militias, decided to force out the Palestinians and to commit ethnic cleansing in 1947 and 1948. They achieved that. They created the state of Israel. And instead of being content and happy of what they have achieved, they, it's a settler colonial ideology. It doesn't just, get corrected by itself. Someone has to pressure them to change, just like apartheid in South Africa. They didn't just wake up, one morning, one good morning, and say apartheid is bad and we're going to be good people and okay, let's get the black Africans their rights. No, the struggle was very, very fierce, and international pressure was huge. The same should happen in Palestine. The Zionist movement decided to get more extremist by time. It was a racist, superiority complex infected movement from day one, but by time they started to get worse. And towards the 70s, the right-wing Zionist groups and factions took over, and the first extremist right-wing prime minister was Menachem Begin. Eventually, since the year 2000, the Israeli right-wing groups and factions are in charge in Israel. Since Sharon, Olmert, Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, Bennett, every new Israeli prime minister comes with a more extremist coalition. 30 years ago, a person like Benjamin Netanyahu used to be considered radical within the Israeli context itself. Eventually, he became prime minister and he became center now. Israel now considers Netanyahu to be center-right. Bennett is considered, used to be considered extremist. Now he is the prime minister. So you see the trend. Israel is becoming more and more extremist. The elite that runs Israel is expansionist in nature, and I don't see any solution without the abandonment of Zionism itself. This defunct ideology, which belongs to the late 19th century and early 20th century, it belongs to the likes of Nazism, fascism. It has to be abandoned. If they continue to think that they are best, they are better than others, that Palestinians are less of humans, if they continue to think that their state should not have a border, should expand as much as their military power allows them, we will continue to have problems in the Middle East. And we're not going to come to any peaceful settlement as long as they continue to think this way. This ideology should be contained. It should be, handled. The problem is that superpowers and major powers in today's world, instead of addressing the problem, they beat around the bush. They don't want to, bring Israel to task. They don't want to address the problem of Zionism, this extremist ideology. They are rather more interested in talking about Islamic extremism, not Jewish Zionist extremism. So they avoid the root cause, which is Zionism. If Israelis, if the layman in Israel, if the Israeli political community abandon Zionism, things will be very different in Palestine. But they're not ready to do so. They would rather pound Gaza with tons of explosives. They would rather expel the Palestinians out of the West Bank. And one of the most common political terminologies in Israeli media is transfer. They talk publicly about transferring 3 million Palestinians out of the West Bank. That's the solution for them, for the demographic problem they have. So we're facing a really extreme ideology, and a very powerful entity. When you have a crazy maniac with so much power, what do you expect? Israel has one of the most sophisticated weaponry and military systems in the world, not only the Middle East. Unfortunately, Uncle Sam continues to spoil them with all these weapons. and they continue to use them as a testing field. They're not, when the Palestinians are not the only white rat in this context. Israelis are being used also by Uncle Sam to test weapons on us. But anyway, this has to come to an end. In order to bring this to an end, people have to address the problem of Zionism. The world has to really call it for what it is. It is an extremist, supremacist ideology that has to come to an end for us to have peace in the Middle East.
Shukran for that, Brother Muslim. As I'd hoped, you gave a very comprehensive, a very historical context. The problems, the obstacles that the Palestinian youth face today is part of a pattern of oppression that has been going on since the 40s. As Brother Muslim pointed out, explained that from the beginning, the Zionist project, the project of creating and continuing Israel, is one that is currently rooted in Zionism, which is a supremacist mentality. What does that mean? That means that they demand domination over Palestine, not cohabitation. And so long as the Zionist mindset continues, then the oppression of Palestine must also continue. So if we want to see an end to the oppression of Palestine, the occupation of Palestine, if we want to see peace in Palestine, we have to, as Brother Muslim said, we have to contain and handle Zionism as a government policy. We've seen people like Netanyahu in the early 90s. They would have been considered radical. Now, until recently, they ran the country. Now it's the next radical, Bennett, who's running the country. This is a warning sign for those of us who are concerned for Palestine. This is a warning sign that if left unchecked, Israel will continue fulfilling its Zionist destiny. And that will mean the continued occupation and oppression of Palestine. Brother Muslim also very clearly explained that historically Israel has been a project that has depended and benefited hugely with global support. Recently, alhamdulillah, in the UK, we've seen an Israeli weapons factory be shut down in Oldham near Manchester because activists from Palestine Action, they took direct action, and they kept invading the factory and until it just got shut down because it was unprofitable for the factory to run. We also have many campaigns and so on holding Zionist MPs to account. Last year, during the May attack on Palestine, we saw so many youths in the UK and across the world, but in the UK we saw many youths take their support for Palestine into their school spaces, to the extent that the government minister for education wrote to schools giving them strict guidelines on how to control such students, and that government minister is now being taken to court, inshallah, for suppressing free speech. There is so much work that needs to be done by us around the world to show our support for Palestine and to undermine Zionism for the inhumane, oppressive ideology that it is. And we have a comment here. We're just going to move into the Q&A and comment section, comment portion of the talk. So if anyone has any comments or questions that they'd like to present to our speakers, please do put them in the comments. I'm just going to quickly go through some here. There is a real need for a major BDS push. That is true. There needs to be a global support for the Palestine cause. Not that many comments, I don't think. Alhamdulillah from Fadila Said Mahmoud Zaki. Carry on dropping in questions and comments. I would like to just start off with a question for Sister Sejood. So obviously, as an organization, you work with youth. So what is it that you hope to achieve with the youth that you work with, and what do you hope to achieve over this coming year, inshallah?
Yes, as a journalist living in Gaza Strip, and the general situation of the Gaza Strip, I want to see a bigger change in the Gaza Strip. I want to send our messages and the Palestinian messages for worldwide, and to I want to tell the whole world about what's happening in Gaza Strip, and I want like to show the world that everything that mainstream media doesn't show to the world. I want to like, and I hope to see more solidarity with Palestinians, and I hope, inshallah, the siege would end, and Palestine liberate, and the whole world know the truth, and know that Palestinians are not numbers, and they deserve to live, and Palestine lives matters, and they have to live like any nation in the world. And I hope they like know the truth and everything that that Israel occupation, like, you know, the propaganda, the Israel occupation propaganda that we can say that falsify the truth and show us as the terrorists. So I hope that those people in the West and in the whole world know that we are the truth completely, and we have the right of this land, and to help us liberate Palestine, and to help us end this occupation forever, inshallah. Thank
Got a
you.
question here which I'd like to bring to Brother Muslim. What would you like people around the world to do to help? What specifically would you like people to do to help? What are your thoughts? And if you also want to explain what PCO Malaysia are doing as well.
I do believe that everyone has a role to play, of course, and the international solidarity movement is still on the rise, and they're doing a lot in Latin America, in North America, in Europe, and you have just mentioned the case of El Beit, this military company. So I congratulate the activists in the UK for their courage and for their hard work and dedication. I do believe that the Palestinian problem started in the West, and it will be solved in the West. The Palestinian people have not ended their sacrifices. We continue to have martyrs every day, literally every day. We have over 7,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, some of whom have been there for 35 years. You can imagine, 35 years. We have lost our infrastructure again and again. Gaza has been, pulverized so many times. The West Bank has been cut into pieces. If you want to, yesterday my sister was telling me she visited my parents. She's in Nablus. My parents are in Hebron. She spent 6 hours crossing at about 200 kilometers. 6 hours, because you have to pass through so many checkpoints, unnecessary. It's a system of subjugation. They want to tell you who's boss. You have to go through a lot of problems. But anyway, so I think the Palestinian people continue to sacrifice, and we will continue to do so. And just like any other nation that struggled, the Algerians for 130 years, the Vietnamese under so many occupations, here in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia and Indonesia, for over 400 years under occupation, we will continue to struggle. But if our struggle is to see the light of day, we need the intervention of the international community, and in particular in the West. Why is that so? Because, as I mentioned, the Palestinian problem started in the UK. It did not start in Palestine. It started in Switzerland, in Germany, Austria, and the UK. Zionist activists who gathered, convened, and plotted with the imperial powers eventually took over Palestine. And this continues to be the case because of the U.S. Support for Israel, the American blind support, more than 90 vetoes in the United Nations Security Council, a military aid which amounts to $4 billion a year to the Israeli military from the U.S., the American taxpayers' money sponsoring the killing of innocents in Gaza. Israel continues to be a problem because of Western support, because of British, French, German, and American support, most importantly. So if this is to come to an end, the people in these nations have to pressure their, ruling elites to end their blind support for the Israeli regime, and this is happening now. It's taking time, but your example just now is a great milestone, ending the operations of a company that builds and develops weapons to kill the Palestinians. Because of civil society activism, because of the young activists, protesters, it came to an end. The same is happening in the US. Now many of the local councils and even in the Congress, many are trying to outlaw BDS, this civilian non-violent protest group. They are trying to outlaw it because it is really pressuring the American society and the American decision makers to change their attitudes towards Israel. In the last offensive on Gaza in May 2021, there were calls by congressmen and congresswomen for the first time to question the American military support for Israel. There were activities, rallies in big American cities, in massive, I think in Detroit, one of the biggest rallies. In London, again and again, protesters pressure these decision makers. In democracies, public pressure has to work. It might not, change things today, but it's eventually going to happen. We want the change in public opinion to be aided by a change in, policies, and we call upon all the activists, all the, not only the pro-Palestine groups to work on pressuring their governments against supporting the Israeli killing machine. We want to work with other union leaders, with other struggles as well, the climate, and environmental groups, other groups calling for equality. We have to engage these people and get them on board, because this is how apartheid came to an end in South Africa, and this is how it's going to end in Palestine. It's going to take time. Palestinians continue to struggle, continue to do their best, but as we say in Arabic, one hand does not clap. We need two hands. International intervention has to come in. There is a change in the international attitude towards Israel. This normalization of killing is coming to an end. People don't really accept to see Israeli brutality and keep silent like they used to. Now they don't rely on the CNN and the BBC only for their news. They can see videos on TikTok and on Telegram and here on Instagram. Even though these companies still censor our voices, but they cannot just cut a live. Most of the time, they cannot cut a live coverage. So we need the help of the international community, the international solidarity movement. More has to be done, and it's going to have an impact. Trust me.
Speaking of censorship and so on, I would recommend everyone to follow 16th October group, PCO Malaysia, and our own page. We do get, sorry, there's a bit of feedback. We do get censored even by Instagram. For example, our page has become restricted, for example, and I'm sure that 16th October group and PCO Malaysia face the same problems as well. Our pages do get clamped down. So if you guys do, as an audience, if you guys do want to hear more from us and see more of our events, please do follow our pages. Question about, we've got a question here about aligning the Palestinian cause with other causes like the Kashmiri cause, especially because India and Israel collaborate together. What are your thoughts on that, Sister Sejood? From on the ground with the Palestine youths, do you see causes aligning and cooperation happening? Like, for example, when we see situations happening around the Middle East and around the world, we see a lot of empathy, a lot of support from Palestine as well. Including things like Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd killing and so on. There was a lot of support from the Palestinians as well. So what do you see, inshallah, in terms of cooperation from Palestinians in Palestine?
Yeah. You mean that like the same like situation between us and Kashmir, or what exactly? I
So
mean,
we got a question about different causes, like the Kashmir cause overlapping with Palestine because the oppressors, Israel and India, cooperate very closely. So from an international point of view, is there a way of connecting these causes? What would the benefit be? What would the difficulties be? What are your thoughts?
Um, we should all agree that everyone deserves respect and freedom. Human life matters. The dignity of individuals and communities should be respected. Unfortunately, with the rise of extremist right-wing populist groups across the world, we see different communities being persecuted. This applies to the case of Palestine, although from day one, the existence, the establishment of a foreign entity over the Palestinian land and Palestinian people was a big problem, a big mistake. But by the coming of right-wing groups, things got worse. And I don't think it's going to take a long time until a new intifada happens in the West Bank. It is actually, some people claim that it is already underway because of the ongoing brutality and the numbers of martyrs every day and prisoners and Israeli crackdown and so on. But anyway, the Israeli regime has become very extremist, and its supremacy and apartheid nature is becoming too obvious. Unfortunately, the Indian government of Modi is also practicing all sorts of racist policies against the Muslims in India, other minorities in India, and the Kashmiri people in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. This is not right. We see the current Indian government working closely with the Israeli government as well. Birds of feather flock together, and they exchange experience in countering terrorism, because to many Islamophobes, being a Muslim is a sufficient criteria to be counted as a Muslim, as a terrorist, or as a possible terrorist. So the current administration of Modi in India has gone way beyond the traditional Indian attitude towards its minority. India used to be a democracy. I don't think it is anymore. Its treatment with the Kashmiris was questionable early on. It's way worse now. Stripping them their special status first, and then eventually sending troops and treating them as combatants, repressing civilians. What is happening in Kashmir is unacceptable. But I do believe that there are still sane friends in India who should stop this and who should pressure the government in India. It's not a lost case. It's not. I still have hope in the communities, the civil society in India, and many other political parties. Actually, the Congress is not like Modi's extremist group with all its problems, but it's certainly not this current extremist group which has been lashing out against Muslims and other minorities for no reason. So I do hope that civil society across the world will cooperate in bringing justice to the Kashmiris and bringing justice to the Palestinians. I see a lot of room for cooperation. This is happening actually across the world. But again, there are, of course, contextual differences between the two cases. There are differences that we have to also observe. In the case of Israel, Israel was created from day one as a settler colonial regime, which denied others. They cancelled us. We did, in their own ideology, in their own founding principles, Palestinians did not exist. when they arrived and they found that there are people who exist, they were in denial. They did not want to accept the reality and the fact that Palestinians existed. So they perpetrated ethnic cleansing. But we still continue to exist. And interestingly and paradoxically, Israeli leaders, the layman even in Israel, still continue to deny the existence of the Palestinians. They will tell you that these Palestinians have come from Jordan, have come from this and that, and we have existed for 4,000 or 6,000 years in Palestine, but to them we are the newcomers and not them. But anyway, there are differences between the struggle in Kashmir and the struggle in Palestine, but there are commonalities as well. I believe that if the civil society in India and the international community pressures this Modi administration, Kashmiris will certainly have a better life, hopefully eventually achieving the right of self-determination, which is enshrined in the United Nations resolutions as well. In the case of the Palestinians, it's a long struggle, a long way to go. We're not going to push the Israelis to the sea like what the Arab nationalist regimes used to say in the 50s and 60s, but we want our freedom, we want justice. We're not going to accept to live under apartheid forever. We have to bring an end to this apartheid regime. It has to, come to an end. If the Israeli society doesn't want to accept this idea, this is their problem. But Palestinians will not sit idle and accept to be humiliated, tortured, and persecuted day and night. We're not going to accept that to happen. Not that we are fans of violence. I'm not talking about the violent resistance. I'm talking about civilian, non-violent resistance. It's growing in momentum all over Palestine. The Great Return March in Gaza, which lasted for more than a year, continued to march every day, pressuring Israel, exposing Israel's apartheid nature to the whole world. The ongoing protests in the West Bank continue to expose Israel for what it is, apartheid. So we have to work with others, not only Palestine and Kashmir, but we have to engage even environmental groups and other human rights groups, Black Lives Matter, and others. At the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all deserve dignity and respect.
Very well summarized, Brother Imran, Brother Muslim. We will need to bring the discussion to an end. I'd like to end with just one last question to Sister Sejood. So obviously, 16th October Group, you are a grassroots, you're on the ground organization, doing what you can to elevate the voices of the youth through the work, through media and through training and so on. So what can people around the world do to support grassroots work like your organization?
Yeah, actually, many people do a lot of things for Palestine, and many thanks for them. But we still need a lot of things for Palestine. I mean, like to intensify the campaigns for Palestine, and to boycott everything related to the Israel occupation. I mean to intensify to the boycotting for Israel occupation like sport and Israel occupation products, because this will enhance the Palestinian issue and every person's heart in the world. And I think it would be great to speak about Palestine, like if they speak individually in their on their accounts, and in a step to remind the people around the world with what's happening in Palestine, and not to forget, because something really tragic, especially in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank, because every day on a daily basis the Israel occupation detain Palestinians and to torture them. And I think it will be great to to say and to talk about Palestine, and always talk about Palestine, and there, we can say, in their news, and to try to to reveal the truth, and then to search more about the Palestinian issue, and not just to hear from the mainstream media about what's happening, because as I said, it shedding the light on on the events in Palestine wrongly, I mean, it doesn't like show what actually happening in Palestine. So I hope that like everyone want to stand in solidarity with Palestine, to search more and to know the truth more about Palestine, and to stand and with Palestinians from like, I mean, what's really happening, and because if they search more in the history, they will find everything. And this what they can do actually, and they do, and many people do this, but I want them like, or I hope them to intensify this, and on a daily basis to make the whole world know about this, not just a few categories of the world, because this is really important issue, and I hope to become one day an international issue, inshallah, and all the people know the reality of the Palestinians and what they are suffering, whether in the prisons, like the Palestinian prisoners, or the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and the suffocating siege they are suffering from, or in the West Bank, and what happening from demolishing their homes, and detaining the Palestinians and torturing
So
them.
again, shukran for a very comprehensive answer. We are going to have to wrap up there. So I would ask everyone who's in the audience to follow our pages. So our speakers pages, 16th October group and PCO Malaysia, as well as our own page, MPACUK. We do try to have these conversations with activists in and from Palestine every other month. So inshallah, the next one will be in March. Do follow us on social media to know when the next one is going to be. And if you did enjoy this event and want to see more of it, please do consider volunteering with MPACUK. The link to that is in our bio, bit.ly/MPACUK-volunteer. And until next time, Jazakumullah khairan for your time, Sister Sejood and Brother Muslim, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.